All right, everyone. Some people on the left yesterday had a problem with me because I made a comment, actually. The state of Vermont is considering the possibility of upping the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And I made a comment on that when it was proposed and said that the governor should veto the idea because at that point, if that happens, because of increases in the cost of living and the cost of goods and services, it will take people who are fundamentally middle class, put them down in the working class. Take people who are in the margins of the working class, put them down in poverty. Because people who right now are making $16 or $17 an hour, they'd be doing fairly well. But if you raise the minimum wage, all of a sudden the amount that they're making looks a little bit less, advanced now, doesn't it? What it will do is fuck with the working and lower middle classes severely. Like somebody like me, I guess that would take me from the upper middle class, or the margins of it at this point, for a small town area, put me back down in the middle of the middle class. So at that point, I would consider leaving the state for economic reasons. Additionally, I think it would probably destroy jobs that we already have problems creating anyway because of the bad business climate of the state. We are taxed enough. This will not address any of the fundamental problems that Vermont faces. It won't work. And then I got some people breathing down my neck on my tweet about it. And they were pretending, I guess, that I've always been, self-employed and decently well off. I'm not rich, but, I can make my ends meet. That's actually totally fucking false. Most of my life I spent in literal poverty. My childhood, until about the time I was, exiting middle school and getting into high school, we weren't even quite outside of the working class. We were on the margins of the lower, the impoverished, and the working class. That's where we were. There were times my mom had some, I don't know what you would call them, some random house cleaning and jobs like that. Made decent money because she was working for wealthy people at the time. And so then we were sort of a little bit better off than that. But I mean, we had the shitty slum apartment. And I was a WIC kid and all those things. I was born poor. Later on, we sort of move up to the lower middle class. Like, we're living here in a nice house. Although the income situation isn't much better off. It's still a low-ish income home. What happened is that because of the fact that there was all this poverty, I started working. Part of it was spiritual in nature. Part of it was nothing more than the fiscal arrangement. Hey, I've got student debt. Because of my OD, I drop out of college, which was probably the best decision I ever made. I don't regret it at all. I don't regret it not going back and getting more debt and finishing a degree. I've thought about going back to like an in-state college, getting an associate's in some random shit, because now I could afford it, but, it's like, I can do that later. I don't really care if I have to scrub all the credits and start again. It's okay. It doesn't really matter. It'd be funny. Just some continuing education bullshit. But, what happened is that I was poor. Not desperately impoverished at that point, but not well off. And so I worked. I started working for myself. I looked around and I said, I have so much debt, there's no way that I'm ever going to pay it off if I get a 9-to-5. There is no job around here. Even if I had graduated, there is no job in the state of Vermont, except for a handful of extremely competitive academic and medical positions that I'm not studying for. There is no job in the state that I can take that will allow me to pay back my student loans. By the way, I don't blame capitalism for that. I don't blame, the evil corporations. No, it's the fault of essentially public educational structures and grants from the government raising prices. It's the same problem, honestly, that you would create with a $15 an hour minimum wage. A lot of people would say, okay, yeah, we'll raise it to $15 an hour, but we're going to fire half of our workers and the other half will have to work harder for that amount of money that is still, now it's still the lowest wage they can get. It's minimum wage. You might even have to cut wages for some people. It would destroy the economy of this state. Other localities try this, they end up hemorrhaging jobs. People who try to pay more, you have some hippie-trippy group, unless it is very profitable and extremely efficient, they will go out of business attempting such a thing. You've got all sorts of problems with this. But I point this out, and people want to act as though I was born with a brass spoon in my mouth. Not quite a silver spoon, of course. No, I was born with no spoon in my mouth. I had to work for my fucking spoon. And now I can do work and from home, and it's a great thing. But, I had to work to actually get to that point. I still do. I start my mornings off. I start working the second I fucking get up. I don't even have a cup of coffee in my stomach yet before I start working. This is part of my work. Yeah, I know that it's like, well, you're sitting at your desk at home and you should try having to have a 9 to 5 or something. Bullshit. No, I know what it's like to skip meals. Don't worry about it. Idiot. I hate to say it, but you're being an idiot. Well, you don't even know anything about my past. You're expecting I was born in a lily white gated community. No, I was born in a slum apartment. That's where I was born into. Yeah, I was the lower class. Look, and it was even worse because at the time, you got to understand, my childhood was spent in Woodstock on the other side of the mountains. Let me tell you something about that part of Vermont. In that part of Vermont, it's not like Rutland where you've got a middle class. You are either a have or a have not if you're in Woodstock. There is a very, very, very small number of people that qualify as middle class there. Woodstock middle class is like Rutland upper middle class. So don't even get me started on the topic of wealth inequality. You think that it's going to make things better by saying, okay, businesses have to start paying more to their low-wage workers. It will still be minimum wage. The cost of goods and services will rise. You're still going to be giving them subsidies. It will make no difference. All it will do is make more people miserable. By taking people that right now they're already at 16, 17 an hour, they're doing okay. They can pay their rent. They can pay their cable bill. They can look forward to maybe, rising a little further. No, you're going to pull the rung right out from under them and send them cascading back down to the bottom. It's not going to help them. All you've done is bunch up more people in poverty. You haven't alleviated them. Okay, they have more purchasing power to go to another state. Why wouldn't they just make their jobs in another state? That's what they'll end up doing. People already leave this. If they're within half an hour of the border, they tend to go to New Hampshire to shop anyway. They'll go to Manchester, they'll go to Keene, they'll go to Claremont, they'll go to Concord, whatever. They already shop in New Hampshire. Or they go over to New York, which is itself, a high tax expensive state. Or they go down to Massachusetts. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if you do this, people will be going all the way to Maine to shop if they have to. They already do that. This is going to make that problem worse. Vermont businesses, therefore, their profits will decline. Everywhere except right in the middle of the state, which is already the tourist enclave of all tourist enclaves, Woodstock to Killington region, they don't have to worry about it. It's not going to affect them. Nobody's going, maybe they go to Lebanon once a month to go do their big shopping. Otherwise, it'll be okay. What you'll see is a lot more people in poverty and a lot more people unemployed in the state. You will destroy the state's economy. I don't want to be part of that. Look, there's a property here. Property is worth money. Why not just sell it and move to a state that doesn't make that same mistake? Before the cost of property declines sharply and you get fucked on that end too and lose 50, 60 grand of total value, why would you want to wait for a state that is, a lot of people will leave the state. No, trust me, they will. Businesses will dry up. Other people will be forced to leave. The state's economy will go haywire and they'll probably have to raise all sorts of taxes, including the property taxes, in order to make up the difference, which will cause a spiraling problem. Now, that would be a rather dumb step to make. And as for me, I wish that when I had been working prior, I could have made $15 an hour. I thought it was a privilege that I was getting, I think, $11 an hour when I was working at a UVM and I think Student Alumni Calling. I think I was getting $11 an hour. Trust me, that was way better than you could get at most of the businesses around there. And that was Burlington. Burlington's better off, respectively, than Rutland. Here, it's like, oh yeah, you can get $9 an hour, and you're doing okay. $12 an hour, it's considered pretty good. We're starting you at $12.50 an hour, says some janitor company. Trust me, there are 100 applicants for a job, even if they're not qualified for the job, and that's the other problem. The other problem is that because of all of the remnant unemployment in the older end of the workforce, a lot of places now they're like, well, we can pick and choose. So yeah, we want 2 or 3 years experience in a field. And so some millennial who doesn't have any experience in that field, you're never going to get that job, which means you can never get the experience to then stay in that field. It's not like the baby boomer times. Look, people still have this weird apple pie view that the job situation in most of the U.S. is still, hey, you get your like newspaper route, and then daddy hires you in his shop, and then old Mr. Smith, he wants you to paint his house, and there are just jobs everywhere. You just have to pound the pavement and look for them. It's not the way things work, and you have less social cohesion anyway, by the way, too. So in pounding the pavement in some communities ain't a good idea. Maybe you get shot. Maybe you get robbed and raped. Maybe you get all three, in some various order, depending on who the perp is. Yeah, it's be a problem. People pretending that I was born with any form of privilege. It's like when people make the white privilege sort of argument. that slides right off me. That may work for someone who was born in the gated community, whose parents are like, oh, my daddy is a dentist, and my mom is like the head nurse or something. Or, my mom does brain surgery. My dad, he fell off a ladder doing his job, so now he just has disability. Like, okay, somebody in that nice, townhouse row gated community, yeah, they probably think there's white privilege. They're never actually going to the inner city, by the way, to go see how people live there. They'll interact with people only in an academic setting, usually, handpicked. But for somebody like me, no, I do not recognize white privilege as existing. It doesn't. Certainly doesn't have any impact on me. See, that's the difference between individualism and communism, basically. You are a communist. So why should I listen to your economic proposals? I think Phil Scott should tell the Senate of the state to screw off. If he doesn't, a lot of people will just leave the state. People who have the capability of mobility will leave. And it's a good thing, by the way. States should be punished for making such elementary economic mistakes. That's one of the great things about being in a nation where you have that differentiation, a fairly significant economic differentiation state to state, is that you can go somewhere where the pastures are greener. In many cases, that happens to be basically Texas, where the pastures aren't, in southern Texas, trust me, they're not green at all. They're sort of a weird reddish-brown color most of the year because it's very dry. But yeah, go somewhere taxes are a lot lower, cost of living's lower. I've been in places where somehow, magically, people are doing fairly well despite the fact that they pay very little in actual taxes. The cost of living is magically far lower, and the weather's nicer. So why the hell would you want to stay in Alpine Wonderland at that point? It doesn't make any sense. Some people boil it down to race. They're like, well, Vermont's like racially homogenous. Well, if you cared about that, there are other parts of the country, like fucking most of Minnesota, Dakotas and stuff. Although they're even colder. They're even colder than Vermont is. There's got to be somewhere in the fucking world where it's warm and things are safe and well taken care of, and you don't have to pay through the nose to be there. So if maybe New Hampshire. New Hampshire would be the closest thing. Only it's not that nice a climate too. If you're near the beach, it's okay. It's a little bit more mild, more temperate. Yeah. I think the state of Vermont would be making a huge, huge problem with $15 an hour minimum wage. But for people to criticize my beliefs on that subject by saying, well, you're self-employed, so you don't care about people who have to work for a living. Bullshit. I work hard. I do. You try doing what I do. You try editing a bunch of old English manuscripts. See how long it takes you. Take you a while. That's about all. Peace out.